Okay, so today we're going deep on Confucius.
Yeah, this is a big one. Confucius master come.
I mean, seriously, this guy's got to be up there for like most influential person ever.
Right. His ideas shaped a whole civilization for what, like 2,000 years?
It's mind-blowing.
Hmm.
And here's the thing. We actually don't know that much about him personally.
Yeah, we know what he said, what he taught, but the man himself, it's kind of mysterious.
That makes it hard to really figure out what he was like,
Totally, which is why this deep dive is so fascinating. We've got some incredible excerpts here, stuff that gets into his life, his philosophy, how his thinking spread.
Yeah, our goal is to help you really grasp why this guy from so long ago is still relevant today.
Exactly. What was it about his ideas, these seemingly simple sayings, that made them so powerful for thousands of years?
And it wasn't just big stuff like governments, it was how people live their daily lives.
Yeah, that's what we're going to unpack for you. The big picture, nice and clear, no academic jargon.
And the historical context here is crazy. 6th century BCE, we're talking major shifts happening all over the world.
Oh, yeah. Lao Tzu and Taoism starting up. You've got Siddhartha Gautama becoming the Buddha.
And over in Greece, the very beginnings of Western philosophy. It's like this sudden burst of intellectual energy everywhere.
Some pretty wild theories about why that happened all at once, too. Alien contact,
Yeah,
changes in the sun's activity.
maybe some kind of collective shift in human consciousness. Hard to say, but it definitely gets you thinking.
So if we zero in on Confucius, he's from this feudal state called Lu, which is modern-day Shandong province in China.
His family was noble, but they'd kind of fallen on hard times, had ties all the way back to the Shang dynasty.
Which, by the way, we used to think was just legend, all those stories about oracle bones and bronze vessels.
Yeah, but get this. Archaeologists have actually confirmed there really was a Shang dynasty, 2nd millennium BCE.
So it wasn't just myth. Pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, it's like those stories were rooted in real history.
Totally. Now, Confucius's father was pretty old when he was born, like 70 years old.
Wow.
And he died when Confucius was just 3, so he was raised by his mother.
Huh. It's interesting how many important figures in philosophy and religion were raised by single parents.
It is, isn't it? You wonder if there's a connection there. Anyway, imagine the world Confucius was born into.
The Zhou dynasty, which had kept things relatively stable in China for centuries, was falling apart.
Constant wars between these feudal states. Slavery was widespread. It was rough, especially for ordinary people.
Yeah, a lot of suffering going on. And that seems to have had a huge impact on Confucius.
Definitely. It made him crave a more peaceful, just society. He realized that things needed to change, like how society was structured, how it worked.
So he wasn't just focused on like personal enlightenment or mystical stuff like some other thinkers at the time?
Nope. He had a very specific goal to train people who could run the government well.
And wow, was he successful? For like 2,000 years, his teachings were basically the gold standard for how officials should behave, how schools should be run, the whole administrative system.
Talk about impact. It's almost like, for most of Chinese history, Confucianism was Chinese culture.
And it's still hugely influential even today, especially among the Chinese diaspora.
What's wild, though, is that Confucius himself apparently felt like a failure. He died thinking he hadn't achieved what he wanted.
It's a pretty stark contrast. You shape a civilization, but you see yourself as unsuccessful.
It's weird, right? And his teachings, if you look at them, they're often these short sayings, little stories, sometimes kind of cryptic.
Yeah, like little nuggets of wisdom.
Exactly. And that's actually part of what made them so powerful. They could be applied in so many different situations.
They weren't these rigid rules, more like guiding principles.
And hard to argue with, like this one. If a theory spreads, it is because heaven wishes it.
Okay, yeah, good luck debating that one.
He was really focused on how people should act, what their attitude should be.
The idea was to fulfill your role in society with virtue.
He wasn't about overthrowing the system. Rulers rule, administrators administer, fathers father, but he wanted people to do those things differently.
He was calling for like an internal revolution, a change in how people behave.
Right. And the foundation of all this was one simple idea. Virtue lies in loving men.
A powerful statement. And notice, it doesn't rely on any particular god or religion. Maybe that's why it's lasted so long.
It's interesting, though, because even though his teachings weren't religious in the usual sense, he did believe there was some kind of goodness built into the universe.
Like a cosmic force pushing things towards good.
Yeah, something like that. He respected those who honored what he called heaven, but he wasn't a fan of the popular religious practices of his time.
Sounds a bit like Socrates, actually.
Now there's a comparison. Some scholars even call Confucius a Socratic Christ, focusing on ethics and virtue.
So let's talk about his early life, what he was trying to achieve.
Well, he got married at 18, had a son named Hugh.
Who didn't exactly turn out how Confucius hoped.
To put it mildly. Yeah.
To make a living, he did all sorts of jobs. Charioteer, taking care of sacred animals.
Yeah, all while studying like crazy. History, music, ancient rituals. He became known as the most learned guy in Lumley.
His big dream was to land a high-level government job where he could put his ideas into practice.
But surprise, surprise, the rulers weren't exactly lining up to hire him.
Yeah, they were more into partying than good governance. And Confucius, let's be honest, wasn't exactly a party animal.
He's pretty straight-laced, super honest, and that apparently didn't work so well in the job market.
It's the age-old problem. The best person for the job doesn't always get it.
Exactly. So what did he do? He became a teacher.
Smart move.
He started a school to train future government officials, and his personality, it seems, was magnetic. People were drawn to him.
It wasn't a formal school, though, right? More like informal gatherings.
Yeah, they'd have conversations, study the classics, lots of Q&A, often outdoors, too.
And his answers to those questions often came in the form of these short moral lessons.
Like, to lead an untrained army into battle is to throw them away.
Or, the superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions.
He who does not correct his mistakes is making a further mistake.
Some of them sound pretty basic now, but they clearly resonated with his students.
And he had high standards, too. If I hold up one corner of a square and the student can't return to me the other three, I won't proceed.
No slacking off allowed.
Not a chance. His students came from all walks of life, rich and poor. It was about talent and dedication, not just your family name.
And while some of his sayings are simple, some are really deep. Like, he who does not know the force of words cannot know man.
Or, the accomplished man seeks what is in himself, the inferior man seeks what is in others.
Those still hit home today.
Definitely. There's even this subtle humor in his teachings, although it's hard for us Westerners to really get it.
Now, while Confucius was busy building what some call his non-religious religion,
his contemporary Lao Tzu was founding Taoism,
which emphasizes the interconnectedness of everything in the universe.
the mystical side of things.
And get this, Confucius actually went to meet Lao Tzu.
Yeah, hoping to learn from him. But Lao Tzu wasn't super impressed. Apparently, he scolded Confucius for being too proud and ambitious.
Ouch. Still, the meeting had a big impact on Confucius.
He described Lao Tzu as a dragon ascending to the heavens.
Which is kind of fitting because Lao Tzu later just disappeared, vanished into legend, riding west, never to be seen again.
It's a great story.
So you've got these two guys, Confucius and Lao Tzu, representing two different paths. One focused on how to live well in society, the other on harmonizing with nature.
The way of man versus the way of nature.
But even though their philosophies were different, there seems to have been a lot of respect between them.
Yeah, it shows you the intellectual energy of that time.
It's kind of ironic, though, isn't it? So many of Confucius' students went on to become successful officials.
Yeah, highlighting the fact that he never really achieved high office himself.
They took his teachings and adapted them to the real world of politics.
Exactly. Sometimes they had to compromise on his more idealistic ideas, but they were definitely influenced by him.
And that started to change how government worked.
It shifted away from this idea that rulers were chosen by heaven and towards a more meritocratic system.
The idea that the government should serve everyone, not just the elites, began to take root.
A huge shift. And it leads us to Confucius's own experience in government.
Which was interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. In his middle age, he finally got a chance to put his ideas into action. He was appointed Minister of Crime in Liu.
And he was really effective at it, but his methods were, let's just say, harsh.
He cracked down hard on crime. The text says there wasn't a single thief left in Liu.
He even instituted the death penalty for wearing unusual clothing and enforced strict separation of men and women on the streets.
It got so strict that some powerful people started to feel threatened.
Yeah, they didn't like all this control.
So the chief minister was bribed to get rid of Confucius. 80 beautiful women, apparently.
Wow. It seems even back then, power and corruption went hand in hand.
The chief minister, maybe not having the moral strength that a Confucian education might have given him, gave in to the temptation.
Confucius was fired.
It's a fascinating story because it shows how tough it is to put idealistic principles into practice in the real world.
It makes you wonder, did he go too far? Was he being hypocritical?
It definitely raises questions about the balance between order and freedom and how even good intentions can lead to bad outcomes.
After that whole debacle, he was offered another position. High-ranking, big salary, the whole 9 yards.
But there was a catch. It was basically a ceremonial role, no real power.
Yeah, he figured that out pretty quick. And he wasn't interested in just being a figurehead, so he quit.
Talk about integrity. He wanted to make a real difference, not just sit around looking important.
By this point, he was in his 50s, and he decided, you know what? I'm going on a road trip.
A decade-long road trip with a group of his students.
But this wasn't just a sightseeing tour. He was looking for a job.
He was hoping to find a ruler who would actually listen to him, who would implement his ideas.
But no luck. He traveled all over China, met with tons of rulers, but nobody gave him a permanent position.
Which is kind of strange, right? He was considered one of the wisest men in China.
His former students were doing well in government.
He had a proven track record, never took bribes, always loyal to his lord.
So what was the problem? Well, the text suggests that maybe his reputation for being so upstanding made him seem, well, a little weird.
Out of touch.
Yeah, and maybe even a little bit of a threat to those in power. It's like, if you're constantly talking about virtue and good governance, it makes everyone else look bad.
There's also this suggestion that he was just plain boring.
Too serious.
No fun at parties.
I mean, it's hard to know for sure, but it does seem like he wasn't the best at playing the political game.
Even his travels are full of these little stories that kind of make you wonder.
Like the time he met with the governor's sister in Wei. She had a, shall we say, colorful reputation.
And it scandalized his students. They were like, "Master, what are you doing?"
Then there was the time he had to dress down to avoid being assassinated.
Yeah, he was worried about making himself a target. And even when he had long talks with the ruler of Chu, impressed him with his ideas about good government, it still didn't lead to a job offer.
Like, he just couldn't catch a break.
Finally, when he was 67, his students back home in Lu were like, "Okay, enough is enough. Come back already."
Maybe they realized he was never going to find the perfect political opportunity.
Or maybe they just missed him. Either way, he went back to Lu.
And spent his last 5 years there. It was a pretty sad time, though.
Yeah, his favorite student died, which really got to him. He started to worry that his teachings wouldn't survive him.
And then his son died, too.
Not much is known about his son, actually, although later generations claimed over 40,000 descendants. So maybe there was more to him than meets the eye.
40,000 descendants. Wow.
Yeah, it's like somewhere along the line, somebody must have been doing something right.
But during those final years, Confucius focused on writing and teaching.
He worked on commentaries on the Chinese classics, the foundation of Chinese culture.
And he systematically passed on his philosophy to his students, which would later be collected into the Analects.
It's important to remember, though, that his teachings weren't a formal philosophical system like we might think of in the West.
It wasn't all logic and arguments. It was more about practical wisdom, how to live a good life, how to run a good government.
With some surprisingly specific details thrown in, like his preference for ginger, the proper length of nightshirts.
He even laid out rules for what to wear in different situations.
Yeah, it's almost like there were these whole other layers to his thinking, theories about fashion, food, who knows what else, that have been lost to time.
It makes you wonder what else he thought about.
So let's break down some of the key concepts of Confucianism. At the heart of it all is Zhen.
Which is often translated as benevolence or humanity.
But it's more than that. It's about this deep care for others, a kind of universal love.
Like Christian compassion, or the Buddhist idea of loving kindness.
Exactly. And along with Zhen, you have Li and Yi.
Li is about proper conduct, rituals, social etiquette.
But it's not just about following rules blindly. It's about showing genuine respect, participating fully.
And Yi is righteousness, doing what's right.
So you have Zhen as the motivation, Li as the expression, and Yi as the guide.
The goal of all this was to cultivate Chunsu.
Superior individuals, people of virtue, living in harmony with themselves and others.
This became the basis of education for the Mandarin class, the scholar officials who ran China for centuries.
And Confucius, always the pragmatist, knew that things change. He famously said, "Only the wisest and stupidest of men never change."
Wise words. Too bad his followers didn't always listen.
As Confucius neared the end of his life at 72, his final words, as recorded by one of his students, were pretty somber.
The great mountain must crumble, the strong beam must break, and the wise man wither like a plant.
Pretty poetic, huh?
Yeah, it's like he knew his time was coming, but he wasn't sure if his teachings would survive.
He was buried by his students in Chufu, which became a major pilgrimage site for over 2,000 years.
But even though Confucianism has endured for centuries, it's definitely changed over time.
It's like trying to connect the dots between the early Christians and the Inquisition.
Yeah, not exactly a straight line.
Still, Confucius's influence is undeniable.
2 centuries after his death, the Han Dynasty adopted his principles and flourished for over 400 years.
They set the tone for pretty much every Chinese dynasty that followed. And even in the West, during the Enlightenment, guys like Leibniz and Voltaire were big fans of Confucius.
Voltaire called him the first man who was not divinely inspired.
High praise.
And even today, you see echoes of his influence. Kung Fu, for example, is named after him.
Although it has nothing to do with his actual philosophy.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. And then there's Mao Zedong.
The personality cult around him with his little red book and everything, it's almost like a weird, twisted version of Confucianism.
Confucius, always the practical guy,
Yeah.
would probably just shrug and say, life is what it is.
Probably.
So let's zoom out a bit and look at Confucianism in the context of Chinese philosophy as a whole.
It's tricky because Western and Eastern philosophy have different ways of thinking, different priorities, but they're both trying to answer the same basic human questions.
Like, how should we live? What's the meaning of life? How do we create a good society?
Exactly. Now, Chinese philosophy really took off in the 6th century BCE with what's called the 100 schools of thought.
Tons of different thinkers, all offering their ideas to rulers.
Kind of like a philosophical free-for-all.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that a lot of early Chinese philosophy was less about abstract arguments and more about practical advice.
Like, here's how to live a good life. Here's how to govern effectively.
It was very grounded in the real world.
Out of all these schools, Confucianism and Taoism became the 2 most influential.
And later, both were shaped by the arrival of Buddhism from India.
But even with all these influences, Confucianism has always stayed true to its practical roots.
Ethics, politics, social harmony, not a lot of metaphysical stuff.
Which is kind of the opposite of how Western philosophy developed.
It's funny, though, because Western thought is now starting to embrace some of those more practical, down-to-earth ideas.
Better late than never, right?
Exactly. Now, contrast that with Taoism.
Founded by Lao Tzu, focusing on the Tao, the way of nature.
The idea is to live simply, spontaneously, in tune with the natural order.
Go with the flow, basically.
Right. And their famous meeting, Confucius and Lao Tzu, really highlights the difference between their approaches.
One focused on society, the other on nature.
Later, the philosopher Chuang-Tzu developed Taoism even further, and he was pretty critical of Confucianism.
He thought it was too artificial, too focused on rules and rituals.
And then there's Buddhism. It arrived in China around the 3rd century CE and had a huge impact.
Yeah, it mixed with Taoism, creating this whole new blend of ideas.
Buddhism is often seen as a religion, but it also has a very complex philosophy.
Lots of metaphysics, lots of talk about the nature of reality, suffering, and enlightenment.
It's definitely a different flavor than Confucianism.
So to really get a feel for the practicality of Confucius's thought, let's dive into the Analects.
It's full of these little nuggets of wisdom.
Like there's this one passage where he lays out the 5 qualities of a good administrator.
To be kind without extravagance, to get work done without causing resentment, to have desires without being greedy, to maintain dignity without being arrogant, and to inspire respect without being harsh.
It's all about balance, empathy, leading by example.
And he also lists 4 things a leader should avoid.
Putting people to death without having taught them, expecting achievements without giving clear orders, giving orders late and then expecting them to be carried out quickly, and being stingy with rewards.
Basically, be clear, be fair, be responsible.
Good advice for any leader, even today.
The Analects are full of other gems, too.
He says that a truly good leader doesn't even need to give commands. People will just follow them naturally.
And true leadership means practicing what you preach.
His advice on learning is great too. Study as if you were never to master it. Hold what you have learned as if you were forever fearful of losing it.
Wise words.
And then there's this really practical observation. It's rare to find someone who has studied for 3 years without thinking about getting a job.
He knew that even the most dedicated students have to live in the real world.
Some of his observations are really insightful.
Like, a superior man should be watchful over himself when alone.
Or be on guard against bravery coupled with righteousness, but resentment of poverty.
And he even talks about how you can get people to do the right thing without them actually understanding why it's right.
Which is kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, but also kind of true when you think about it.
And then you have these little moments where you get a glimpse of his personality.
Like when he points out how tough pine and cypress trees are, even in winter.
Or when he encourages people to never give up.
There's even this story about one of his students who was getting a little too big for his britches.
Yeah, he went from feeling absolutely right to absolutely sufficient to absolutely perfect.
A good reminder to stay humble.
One of my favorite stories is about the time a court official questioned Confucius's wisdom.
He was like, hey, if you're so smart, how come Lord Chow is violating all these rituals?
And Confucius just admitted that he wasn't perfect. He said, when I make a mistake, everyone knows it.
Pretty honest for a guy who was supposed to be the wisest man in China.
Yeah, it shows that he was human, just like the rest of us.
And then there's this whole section where he lays out detailed rules for what to wear.
His theory of fashion, some people call it.
He talks about collar colors, what to wear at home, what to wear in summer and winter, morning clothes, formal wear.
It's incredibly detailed, but as the text points out, it doesn't really have any overarching principles.
It's like he was just really, really into clothes.
And it ends with this unresolved question about what to wear to a sacrifice if you're in the company of shady characters.
A fashion dilemma from ancient China.
It's a fun little detail.
So as we wrap this up, it's clear that Confucius was a complex guy.
Deep thinker, huge influence, but also kind of flawed, maybe a little bit of a curmudgeon.
But his teachings have resonated for thousands of years.
And they still speak to us today.
They're all about living a good life, creating a just society, treating others with respect.
Timeless values, really.
And I think that's what makes Confucius so fascinating.
He was trying to answer these big questions that we're still grappling with today.
So as you go about your day, think about this. How can we apply Confucius's ideas to our modern world?
It's a challenge, but it's one worth thinking about.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
See you next time.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.